And good morning and welcome to another installment of Advanced Composition with Professor Kent Lee. While you're working in your midterms, I thought I'd kind of do something else. Next time on Friday, we are going to look at citation systems. Probably spend the full 2 hours on that on Friday. So for today, let's talk about connectors, transitionals. We should look at the PDF book, the textbook that I sent you through LMS before. And in chapter 10.8, section 10.8, there's a section called connectors or transitionals or connectives. And it's about page 160, section 10.8. And we are going to maybe review what you've talked about. I'm sure you've covered this in your previous writing classes, but I want to say a little bit more about the rationale for connectors and certain issues that people have with using them. So we'll use the term connector. You may know the term conjunction, and conjunctions are part of the family of connectors. Conjunction is kind of a strict grammatical syntactic term, but a wider term in terms of pragmatics or how you use language in context is connectors or connectives, whatever. And the reason we use that term instead of conjunctions is there are certain multi-word expressions that function in the same way as conjunctions, like in order to, by the way, of course, and things like that, which are more than one word. But together they are functioning sort of like a conjunction. So of course you know that they indicate the logical flow from point to point, from idea to idea, from sentence to sentence, from phrase to phrase, from clause to clause. Let's talk a little bit more about the rationale. And of course, just for review, look at 10.8.1. It's called flow. There are two versions of a paragraph. Pause for a minute and take a look. What's the difference between these two? Which is better? Okay, so you probably noticed that the second version flows a lot better. There are clear signals about the logical relationship of ideas and sentences. So for example, it's kind of for explanation. Because, kind of cause and effect. So there are cause and effect or reason, connectors, and even, which is kind of a, we don't think of it as a connector. It's a special kind of adverb. It's kind of an emphatic adverb. It's for emphasis. Even, you don't usually think of it as it's more a modifying a noun phrase. So it's not really your normal connector, but it plays a role in terms of emphasis or highlighting important things. Things like also, kind of addition, and things like that. Other treatments are not. What's another way of saying that? Unlike other treatments. Unlike other treatments, you can use a preposition. Sometimes other things like prepositions, well, it's also like a conjunction, have similar functions. Now, in terms of connectors, we have to distinguish between main clauses and subordinate clauses. This is a 종속절, subordinate clauses. And there are certain connectors, certain conjunctions that go with main clauses sometimes, and sometimes with subordinate clauses. But what's the difference? You learned a lot about subordinate clauses or dependent clauses is another word in your grammar classes, but you never learned why. I mean, why do we use these? In terms of flow, there's an important difference. Look at 10.8.2. It's in the middle of page 160. Sentence structure, it's called. There are several examples, two versions of two sentences, an A and a B version. What's the difference between the A and B version? Okay, you probably noticed that the B versions flow better, and there's a reason for that. And it's partly from the connectors that provide a better flow, but also the dependent clauses, subordinate clauses, the 종속절, is a Korean term. A main clause or an independent clause is a clause that can, by itself, could be an independent sentence. I ran the simulation. Then the problems became apparent. A subordinate clause is a clause that cannot stand by itself as a sentence unit. It has to combine with the main clause to be grammatically complete. You can say after I ran the simulation and stop. It needs a main clause. Not only, there's a reason that sometimes using dependent or subordinate clauses in writing flows better and sounds better, and it's this. What is the function of a main clause versus a subordinate clause? How are they different? What's the basic difference? What is the basic difference in terms of their function, their language function? Do you have any idea? Pause for a minute and think about it. Okay, any idea? It's kind of hard. When your brain reads a main clause, your brain gives more attention to processing it, to interpreting it. Your brain reads it a little more carefully and spends a little more time to process everything, because it's kind of the foreground. It's the foreground of your attention. Now, a subordinate clause is a kind of clause that the brain will actually read through a little bit faster, a little more quickly, and maybe not process as deeply. Why? Because the information in dependent clause is, it's maybe secondary. It's less important than the content of the main clause. It could be sometimes something that's familiar. Maybe it was mentioned before, as I said before, something like that. It could be information that's maybe a little more familiar, or it's a little less important, or it's providing maybe an explanation or a reason for the content of the main clause. So after in the simulation, so that kind of in a sense less important. Maybe that was talked about in the previous sentence. So this does what we call backgrounding. So you have foreground, background. Foreground, like you're watching me, I'm the foreground of your attention. The background is what? The walls, the sky, the window, the ceiling, the floor, the stuff you're not paying as much attention to. That's the background. So it's kind of like a foreground, background distinction. The main clause is more foregrounded. Subordinate clauses are more backgrounded. And that's why having a mixture of sentence types in your writing, including sentences with dependent clauses, flows better. It's a better rhythm. So you're kind of going foreground, background, background. You're going back and forth. And it's easier for your brain to handle the information and go through some stuff a little more quickly and focus on the main points. The main clause is the main point of the sentence. It's like rhythm. Now, if every sentence is like a short main clause sentence, it's hard to read. It's boring. It's like a da, 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 da kind of rhythm, very boring rhythm, like North Korean military music, very boring. But if you have like foreground, background, a mixture of sentence types, it's better rhythm. It's kind of like jazz, like da, 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 da. It's a better rhythm. And it's easier to read. It's also easier for the reader to understand this is the main point and this is maybe secondary. So it flows better for that reason. Writing flows better when you use more complex sentences. Doesn't mean every sentence needs to be a complex one, but you have a variety of sentences. Things flow better. It's easier to read. The flow of thought is easier to process. So 3A, so is kind of a coordinating conjunction between two main clauses, but because or since, it kind of backgrounds, maybe that's information it could be somewhat more familiar, a little, or doesn't require as much explanation, and in itself is an explanation, a reason for what's in the main clause. It was entered as a control variable. So because is sort of backgrounds. And what's the difference between because and since? I think since does background stuff even more. I think it's a stronger backgrounding marker, because since is often used for stuff that's maybe more familiar or obvious or known or mentioned before. So for B, we could have made 4C with since, and that would background it even more, because this is really familiar, ideas to social science people. That's why we use dependent clauses. You spent years learning how to do them grammatically, properly, but they probably didn't tell you why. Why do we need to know these? We use these in language to kind of foreground and background things for kind of a rhythm and a flow of information. Okay. Next we have a little section starting at the bottom of 160. 160, conjunctive adverbs. So you know conjunctions, you know adverbs. Well, there's a group of adverbs that got drafted or put into service as conjunctions. So they're sort of adverbs that function like conjunctions. So typical ones are however, therefore, furthermore, otherwise, maybe moreover. But do we use moreover much today? It's kind of less common. It's maybe, we do use it sometimes in academic writing, but less often. If you use it too much, you'll sound like you're pretending to be British or something. It's kind of for like making a final point or emphasis. Moreover, emphasizing some explanation or important evidence. People tend to make mistakes with the punctuation and phrasing of these things. Look at 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5. Which of these is better and why? Okay, number 1. 1, however, is preceded by a comma, which is not proper formal style. Maybe very colloquial or conversational style, but not in writing, not in academic or formal writing. 2 is correct usage of punctuation. There's a full stop before however. So a full stop, because however is, it's like a sentence adverb. It's starting a sentence. So we have sentence adverbs. You start a sentence with, oh, thankfully the exam was postponed. Fortunately, the exam was postponed. Well, that's a sentence adverb. It starts the sentence and it's modifying the whole sentence. So however, and these other conjunctive adverbs are kind of like sentence adverbs, which are also functioning like conjunctions. So they are at the beginning of the sentence, and that's why they're conjunctive adverbs. They are showing how this whole clause or sentence is related to the one before it. It's making a contrast, in fact, kind of a stronger contrast. So, however, if you say it, the results of the preschooler's capacity for language school is affected by age. However, at this point, so notice how the intonation. There was a stop before however in speaking, and then after I said however, there was a slight intonation rise on it, or fall, or at least a little break, a little intonation break. And so this is reflected in the way we punctuate it. These conjunctive adverbs, like however, are preceded by a stop. A stop can be a period, or like in number 3, a stop can be a semicolon, like this. Now a semicolon is like a period, except that the semicolon kind of implies that there is more of a logical connection. It makes more of a stronger connection between two clauses. It implies a stronger connection. Like, just don't stop. These are really closely related ideas. The first one anticipates the next one, or the second one is kind of a cause and an important contrast. Here it's just a slight difference in nuance, not much difference. But anyway, however, these things like however, therefore, furthermore, otherwise are preceded by a full stop, either a period or a semicolon, and they are followed by a comma. In speaking, I would say however at this point. So notice again, there's maybe a slight pitch change or at least a slight break in speaking. However, at this point, they're all preschoolers. So that comma reflects, commas are not there arbitrarily. They reflect, for example, how we speak. They reflect the slight, smaller pauses or intonation breaks between grammatical units. 2 or 3 would be correct. 3 if you like longer sentences and making kind of the logical connection maybe stronger between two phrases. Number 4, furthermore, same thing. It needs a full stop before and a comma afterwards. So If you are using these at the beginning of a clause or sentence to join two clauses or sentences, you need a full stop before and a comma after for however, therefore, furthermore, otherwise, and if you want to use moreover, same is true. Don't overuse it, moreover, though. Okay, unless you're really a posh British speaker. Posh is like fancy or elegant. If you want to sound posh as a British speaker, okay, you can say moreover a lot. Next one, sentence adverbs. So we talked about those. These are these little things, and these are nice transitions, and there's a lot of them. If you search on my website, there might be a page on sentence adverbs on my website. I'm not sure. There's so much stuff on my website, I can't manage it anymore. Next section, 10.8.5, sentence adverbs. There's a special problem with sentence adverbs that East Asian students have, I notice. It's a minor one, it's with the one word especially. Look at especially in these sentences, numbers 1 through 6. One of them is not very good, at least. Pause the video and discuss these, 1 through 6, the use of especially. Do you see any problems? Okay, number 1, if you're Korean, maybe Chinese, it might sound okay to you. Because, for example, in Korean, even in formal academic Korean, it's okay to start a sentence with 특별히. But in English, no, not so much. You would do it in informal, colloquial, conversational English, but in academic writing, you wouldn't start a sentence with especially like this, like in number 1. Here, at least in a normal standard sentence, like number 1, especially is an emphatic adverb. We saw even before it's an emphatic particle or word. Especially is an emphatic adverb also. It's maybe stronger than the others, in fact. But then you're putting it at the beginning of the sentence, and at that position it's also a sentence adverb where it's modifying the whole sentence. So in terms of the flow, it's like I'm emphasizing the entire sentence, and that's bad flow for academic writing. We talked about subordinate and main clauses and how you have a foreground background flow. Yeah, you don't want to have like the same importance to everything, like da 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 all the time. It's hard to read. Same thing here. If you're putting emphasis on the entire sentence, it breaks the flow. You don't have a smooth flow, at least for academic or formal style. This would be maybe normal in conversational English, in colloquial English, but not in formal writing. It's like you're shouting the entire sentence. It's like typing an email in all capital letters. You're like shouting the entire sentence, which sounds awkward. You don't have a good flow and a good information rhythm. So this doesn't work. What you can do, number 2, you can just cut it out altogether. Do you really need it? Is it really necessary? Maybe not. 2, cut it out altogether. 3, put it inside the sentence where it modifies a particular word. If it's emphasizing a particular word in the sentence, like if it's just emphasizing another adverb in the sentence, or another adjective, or a verb in the sentence, it's okay. It's not shouting the entire sentence, it's just emphasizing one word, and that's fine. Economic predictions are especially useful. That's good. Or 4, if you want something like a sentence adverb, use something weaker, in particular, particularly, number 4. That's okay. Now, number 5 and number 6 these are okay too, because it's not modifying the entire sentence. In number 1, you have a regular sentence with like your sentence adverb and then your regular subject, verb, object order. So subject, verb, object, normal order. It's a normal regular sentence, a standard sentence. In 5, what you have is important is moved to the front of the sentence. Important was the finding. The finding is a subject. So this is something we're going to talk about later. but especially is modifying important. It's only modifying important, not the whole sentence. It's before important. It's not before the subject and verb. It's only before important. Number 6, especially in this research trial, it's modifying that prepositional phrase. It's not modifying the whole sentence. The main sentence begins with participants were screened for health issues. That's the main sentence. It's not modifying the main sentence. It's modifying a particular word or phrase in the sentence. So 6 is okay too. It's for nice flow. Okay, and next, variety of conjunctions. You've probably learned about some of these in the past, but as I did some research where I looked at how often people use but, so, then, and in sentences. First of all, did anyone tell you not to start a sentence with a conjunction? Wrong. Look at good academic writers. Really read good academic articles by good writers. They start sentences with conjunctions. It's a silly rule. Some people teach you that rule because they're trying to maybe get you to stop overusing some of these, but they shouldn't teach it like that. That's wrong. We do start sentences with conjunctions. It's just that if you start a sentence with a very common conjunction, especially if you do it a lot, it sounds kind of boring. Your writing doesn't sound as really academic or formal or intelligent or cool or coherent or such. So instead of but, so, then, and, what can you use instead for more variety and more specific contrasts? Well, but. However, although, though, to the contrary, yet, while, etc. Instead of so, the number of other conjunctions for cause and effect or result or explanation. Since, because, hence, therefore, thus, etc. Then for sequence, and then before, after, or put it in the middle of the sentence, that's okay there. And now starting a sentence with and, it's not wrong, but it's colloquial style. We don't start sentences with and in formal academic English. You can use also instead, that's fine. But don't start a sentence with and if you're doing formal writing. Again, it's more email or colloquial conversational style. Some other things I've noticed as I looked at East Asian writers and their writing samples, overuse of case, especially Korean writers do this, and I think you're thinking of in Korean kyungwue nun. It's a transitional in Korean, but we don't really have an exact equivalent in English. You could say, for example, or just start a sentence with a subject, but get rid of those case transitional. Stop using case as a transitional marker. It's very, if we do it, it's very, very colloquial. We wouldn't do it in academic writing. So here are some examples where I've cut it out. Also, avoid using too much there is, there are. East Asian writers tend to overuse it when they're writing in English. Because I know in Chinese you use yo a lot, and in Korean you use ita a lot. And ita has a lot of meanings. For example, exist, to have, to be, and things like that. But in English, there is more so for introducing a new topic in writing. So if you use there are too much, your writing will sound too informal. Cut some of them out, start a sentence with just a subject instead. Or to indicate a new topic, start a new paragraph, or just start a sentence with a full subject. So when you can, a few uses of there is, there are would be okay, but don't use it too much in academic writing. It will make your writing sound too informal. Another thing is these sequence markers, first, second, third. Try not to overuse these. East Asian students are taught to use these for your TOEFL or TOEIC essay. I don't know if I have an essay in the TOEIC, but on the TOEFL essay, that's fine. You need to structure your TOEFL essay with a clear first, second, third. It makes you structure it nicely, and the graders can easily see when they're rating it, when they're grading it, they can easily see it structured. But in academic writing, we don't use these as much. cut them out if you can. We would use them if you are talking about, if you need to explain something that's complicated or abstract and it's hard to follow. If something is hard to follow because it is abstract or it's complicated, then you can use these. But don't use them all the time. It's not used for the standard enumeration of your ideas in normal writing. This is something you might use maybe if you're writing more technical academic writing and you really need to make clear a sequence or a set of relationships when something is hard to read or hard to follow. Otherwise, cut them out if you can. Sentence fragments, so you know a because phrase, you may hear people using because clauses as whole sentences in like TV shows, English TV shows, and that's colloquial, okay, fine, but in formal writing it is a subordinating conjunction, it needs to join a main clause. So if you just say because and no main clause, it's kind of incorrect or awkward for formal writing. It needs a main clause. I have some notes here about some other connectors which you can look at on your own. I think I will stop there. We might come back to some of these if we ever have live classes this semester. Otherwise, we are going to move on next time to talking about citation systems. Yay, fun stuff. So I'm not sure what citation systems you've learned in your past courses. I'm mainly going to talk about APA, but I'm going to talk about Chicago and MLA. Now for your essay in my class, for your essays for your midterm, for the next essay assignments, and you're going to do what's called a genre analysis unit. So after the midterm, we're going to start a genre analysis. If you don't know what that is, don't worry, you'll find out. It's fun, trust me. For that, and then the final paper in my class, you can use whichever system you like. Use whichever system you like or is useful for whatever you're doing in college. You're maybe focusing more on literature or other humanities or linguistics or education, whatever. Use whatever is appropriate for you. Use whatever you want to use for my class. I am used to a lot of different citation systems, so that's fine. Anyway, we will talk about that next time. Citation systems, and it's going to be a little bit dry and boring, but it's important stuff, so that will probably be the next 2 sessions on Friday. So until then, good luck on your essay. You should have gotten an email from me, and there's another Google form assignment about that. So until then, good luck and goodbye.